Forget everything you think you know about Victorian romance. Seriously, all those sweeping love stories, the fancy balls, the perfect gentleman, just push it all aside, because we are about to yank back the lace curtains on an era where, for a Mormon, marriage wasn't a fairy tale. Far from it. It was often a life sentence. Picture this. It's 3 in the morning, 1847, and you can hear your sisters sobbing through the thin walls of your house. It's not the first time, not since her wedding 6 months ago. But in the morning, what happens? She'll come down to breakfast wearing a high-necked dress, maybe a little powder to hide a bruise, and she'll have this practiced smile on her face. And nobody, absolutely nobody, will say a word. That was the silent, terrifying reality for so many women. So yeah, that's what we're getting into. We're going to dismantle that romantic myth piece by piece to show you the truth. For Victorian women, marriage wasn't just about finding love. It was about pure survival. And here's the kicker. This wasn't just some unspoken social rule. Oh no, this suffering was written brutally and clearly right into the law. Let's look at the legal principle that literally made a married woman disappear. It had a name, coverture. The moment a woman said, "I do," her entire legal identity was just gone, covered up by her husband's. In the eyes of the law, she pretty much ceased to exist as a person. Think about that. 2 people walk into a church. Legally speaking, only one person walks out. And this wasn't some legal loophole. This was the main event. The most famous legal scholar of the time, Sir William Blackstone, he spelt it out for everyone. Her very being is suspended. I mean, what a chilling phrase, right? She was a legal ghost. Her entire existence was now just an extension of her husband. So what did this actually look like in real life? Well, a married woman couldn't own property, not even something her own father left her in his will. If she somehow managed to earn money, guess what? Those wages belonged to her husband. She couldn't sign a contract, couldn't sue someone who cheated her. She couldn't even write her own will without getting his permission first. She was, in every legal sense of the word, his property. So when you're legally invisible, you have zero economic power. And that's how marriage became an economic prison. For most women, it wasn't a choice you made out of love. It was a transaction you made to survive, because there were hardly any other options. Welcome to the marriage market. And it was exactly that, a market. It was cold, and it was calculating. A man was judged on his money, his job, his status. But a woman? She was judged like livestock. Was she pretty? Was she pure? How big was her dowry? Could she run a household? It was this whole performance where you had to be charming, but God forbid you were too smart. And to make this prison seem beautiful, they wrapped it up in this ideology they called the cult of domesticity. Women were told they were the angel in the house, too pure, too delicate for the harsh realities of the world. It sounds nice, doesn't it? But really, it just meant you were worshipped as long as you stayed in your cage, totally powerless and totally obedient. And get this, the control went all the way down to their clothes. Fashion was actually a weapon. Corsets were laced so tight they literally rearranged your internal organs. The skirts and petticoats were so heavy that just walking across a room was exhausting. Women would actually faint from lack of oxygen, and this was seen as a good thing, proof of how delicate and feminine you were. Unbelievable. All of this, the legal erasure, the economic prison, the physical confinement, it had a devastating, devastating personal cost. For so many women, the Victorian bedroom wasn't some romantic haven. It was a place of trauma, fear, and basically an unspoken war on her body and her mind. The famous explorer Mary Kingsley, she did not pull any punches. See, young women were raised to be completely ignorant about sex. They were told nothing except vague things about wifely duties. So you can imagine, their wedding night was often a terrifying and traumatic shock. Kingsley's quote is so jarring because it's just so brutally honest about that experience. And that leads us to a really dark and really important question. In Victorian England, was it legally possible for a husband to be guilty of raping his own wife? The answer is just chilling. Legally? No, it was impossible. The very idea was considered a contradiction. The logic was, by saying "I do" at the altar, a wife had given her consent permanently. She had legally signed over control of her body to her husband for him to use whenever and however he wanted. There was no law to protect her. On top of that, there was this relentless pressure to have children, over and over again. A woman's entire value was tied to her fertility. And listen, even Queen Victoria, the most powerful woman in the entire world, who had 9 kids, she hated it. She actually wrote that during childbirth, she felt like nothing more than a cow or a dog. That tells you everything about how dehumanizing it was. So what happened when women, inevitably broke down under all this? When they suffered from what we would now call depression or PTSD? Well, the brilliant medical solution was something called the rest cure. But it wasn't a cure at all. It was basically psychological torture designed to break her spirit completely and force her back into being a quiet, submissive wife. But, and this is the important part, even in the darkest prisons, people will always fight for a way out. The story of Victorian marriage isn't just about oppression. It's also the story of resistance, of the very first cracks of light appearing in those prison walls. But man, it was a long, slow fight. We're talking decades of struggle. It started with women like Caroline Norton, who launched a public campaign way back in the 1830s after her awful husband legally took her kids and all her money. It took until 1882 for women to finally get the right to own their own property. And sometimes freedom came from the weirdest places, like the invention of the bicycle, which gave women a way to move around on their own for the first time ever. And that rebellion, it took so many different forms. Some women fought with their pens, like the Bronte sisters, who had to hide behind men's names just to get their work published. You had the rise of the new woman, who dared to demand an education, maybe even a career. And eventually, all these little seeds of rebellion grew into the massive, powerful suffrage movement that demanded a voice. So, okay, the Victorian era is long gone. The laws have changed, thank goodness. But that leaves us with one last big question to think about. How many of those deep-rooted ideas about a woman's place, her value, her purpose, how many of them are still quietly hanging around in the shadows today?